I never imagined my name would one day echo through a courtroom full of strangers, not as a wife, but as a question. That morning, I stood in front of the mahogany doors of Whitestone and Pierce Law Chambers, holding my handbag like it was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. The sky outside was pale, washed with early winter gray, and the city felt colder than I remembered. It had been 3 months since my husband, Richard, passed away. And still, every sound, every scent of coffee and rain reminded me of him. I'd been dreading this day, the reading of his will. Part of me hoped they'd postpone it forever, that I'd never have to see his children again, never have to endure the judgment in their eyes. But here I was, dressed in the same black dress I wore at his funeral, standing among people who once called me stepmother, but now whispered gold digger. When the doors opened, I walked in quietly, keeping my chin high even though my heart was trembling. The room smelled of paper, ink, and stale air conditioning. A long table stretched before us, and the lawyer, Mr. Lawson, motioned for everyone to sit. Richard's children, Evelyn, the eldest, with her mother's sharp jawline and piercing eyes. Andrew, the son who never forgave his father for loving again. And little Chloe, barely 22, who used to hug me when she was younger but now wouldn't meet my gaze, were all there, looking like a jury ready to deliver a sentence. "Mrs. Morgan," Mr. Lawson began, his tone polite but distant, "thank you for joining us." I nodded, forcing a faint smile. "I was his wife," I said softly, as if to remind not just them but myself. Evelyn scoffed, leaning back in her chair. "Wife," she repeated. "You were his trophy, not his partner. Let's not pretend you were anything more than that." The words hit me like glass. Andrew muttered something under his breath about gold diggers, and Chloe's eyes watered, but she didn't defend me. No one did. I wanted to speak, to tell them about the nights I sat by Richard's hospital bed, holding his frail hand, whispering prayers he couldn't hear. I wanted to tell them how he used to call me Sunshine when his world grew dark, how I cooked his favorite soup every Sunday even when he could barely eat. But what would it change? To them, I was the young woman who married their father after their mother's death. To them, I was an outsider who walked into their family wearing perfume and promises. Mr. Lawson cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "If we could begin," but Evelyn slammed her palm on the table. "Before you start," she said sharply, "we just want to make it clear that she shouldn't even be here. This is our father's will, not some charity event for his companion." Companion. That word stung more than insult. It stripped me of every memory we'd built together. Mr. Lawson frowned. "Miss Carter, your father's instructions were clear. Mrs. Morgan is to be present for the reading." "Mrs. Morgan," Andrew sneered. "She doesn't even deserve that title. She was my father's distraction, a woman half his age who played nurse and wife for a few years." I looked at them, these children of the man I loved, and realized grief had turned them into strangers. I didn't hate them. I pitied them. Because they didn't know that love can bloom even in the strangest seasons. When Richard and I met, I wasn't looking for love. I was 31, running a small flower shop downtown, still recovering from a heartbreak that had drained the color out of my life. He walked in one afternoon, a tall, silver-haired man in an elegant navy suit, searching for white roses for his late wife's memorial. His hands trembled as he spoke. I remember offering him a seat, watching him stare at the petals like they held ghosts of his past. He came back a week later, then again the next, until his visits became less about flowers and more about conversation. We talked about everything, music, loss, and how hard it is to rebuild yourself when the world thinks you should have moved on. He was gentle, thoughtful, and yes, older. 23 years older, to be exact. But love doesn't always follow the calendar. It creeps in quietly without permission, and before you know it, it's home. When we married 2 years later, the whispers began. "She's after his money. She's playing nurse until the will is read. His children will never accept her." I ignored them all, because Richard's eyes told me the truth every day, that he had chosen me not to replace anyone, but to remind him that life could still be kind. The lawyer's voice pulled me back to the present. "As stated in Mr. Richard Morgan's will," he began, "certain personal effects and property are to be distributed among his children, as well as his surviving spouse." That's when Evelyn interrupted again, her tone dripping with venom. "Surviving spouse, you mean her?" Mr. Lawson looked up, confused. "Is there a problem?" Evelyn smirked. Oh, there's no problem at all, just a misunderstanding. She shouldn't be here because, well, maybe you don't know our father's marriage to her isn't valid. My breath caught. What? Andrew leaned forward, his smile cruel. Dad never finalized the divorce from Mom. The papers were never filed, so technically you were never legally married to him. The room went silent. Even the air felt heavy. Mr. Lawson blinked rapidly, flipping through the folder of documents before him. That can't be right. The marriage certificate was submitted with the estate paperwork. Evelyn interrupted again, her voice low and sharp. Check the dates, Mr. Lawson. You'll see what we mean. He did, and within seconds his face turned pale. He adjusted his glasses, then looked up at me, his voice trembling with disbelief. Mrs. Morgan, he said slowly, are you my client's widow? The room spun. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My legs felt weak and my chest tightened. All at once, every memory, every smile, every whispered promise from Richard flashed before me. The wedding, the vows, the laughter, was it all built on something broken? I could feel Evelyn's smug eyes on me, savoring every second of my silence. Looks like you were just the mistress after all, she whispered. But I wasn't ready to believe it. Not yet, because the man I loved wasn't a liar. And if there was one thing I knew about Richard Morgan, it was that he always kept his promises. I sat frozen in that chair, staring at the lawyer's lips as if they were speaking another language. Are you my client's widow? The words echoed in my head like a cruel riddle. For a moment, I couldn't feel my hands. My wedding ring, the one Richard slipped onto my finger under the gentle hum of piano music 5 years ago, suddenly felt heavier than gold. It felt like shame. Check again, I whispered, my voice barely audible. There must be a mistake. Mr. Lawson hesitated, flipping through page after page of legal documents. The quiet rustle of paper was the only sound in that suffocating room. Then his brows furrowed. He sighed heavily, took off his glasses, and looked at me not as a lawyer but as a man who pitied what he saw. It seems the divorce papers from Mr. Morgan's first marriage were never processed. The file is incomplete. There's no court seal, no signature. Legally speaking, he exhaled slowly. Legally speaking, his first marriage still stands. Evelyn smiled like she'd been waiting her whole life to hear that sentence. So she was never his wife, she said triumphantly. Just his pretty little nurse with benefits. Andrew leaned back, grinning. I knew Dad wouldn't marry her properly. He was too smart for that. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream to defend the man I loved, but my voice betrayed me. All I could do was clutch the edge of the table and whisper, no, he wouldn't do that to me. He wouldn't. Mr. Lawson looked at me sympathetically. Mrs. He paused, correcting himself. Ms. Morgan, I'm so sorry. I'll need to verify everything before we proceed. The rest of that meeting blurred into a haze. The sound of papers being gathered, chairs scraping, the cruel laughter of my stepchildren. It all merged into one long hum of disbelief. I stumbled out of the office and into the cold afternoon air. The city buzzed with life, but I felt like a ghost moving through it. I walked aimlessly, my heels clicking against the pavement, tears burning behind my eyes. How could this be? Richard was meticulous about everything, his estate, his business, his health. How could he forget something as crucial as a divorce decree? I remembered the day he proposed. We were in Paris near the Seine under a sky that smelled like rain and memory. He'd held my hand, his voice trembling as he said, I don't want to waste another day without calling you my wife. I said yes without hesitation. I never questioned anything. Maybe love blinds you just enough to stop seeing red flags waving in the distance. That night I sat on our bed, asterisk my bed now, or maybe not even mine anymore, asterisk, staring at the framed photos on the dresser. Richard smiling. Richard at the garden party. Richard holding me close at our wedding. And there beside it a smaller picture, his first wife, Margaret, beautiful, graceful, gone long before I came along, or so I thought. I picked up the photo. Did you ever really let her go, Richard? I whispered. Or was I just filling a space she left behind? Sleep wouldn't come that night. My mind kept replaying every detail, the lawyer's face, the children's sneers, the echo of that question. Are you my client's widow? The next morning, I went back to Whitestone and Pierce. Mr. Lawson was there, sorting through files. He looked startled to see me. I didn't expect you so soon, he said gently. I need answers, I replied. Please, I need to know the truth. He nodded and motioned for me to sit. I've been reviewing your husband's files all night, he said, sliding a folder across the table. And it's complicated. It seems Richard did attempt to finalize his divorce years ago, But there were delays, paperwork errors, missing signatures, and then he paused. Then his first wife withdrew the filing before it was complete. I blinked. Withdrew it? Why? He hesitated. She claimed they were reconciling. My heart stopped. Reconciling, but she's dead, isn't she? He frowned. Mrs. Margaret Morgan passed away only 2 years ago, according to hospital records. I froze. 2 years? He nodded slowly. Yes, 2 years, which means legally you could not have been married to Mr. Morgan until after her death. I felt the world tilt beneath me. All this time, I had been the other woman, the affair, the secret. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping behind me. No, I whispered. He told me she was gone. He said he'd been alone for years before meeting me. Mr. Lawson's eyes softened. I don't think he meant to deceive you. The will, the wedding, it all shows he believed in your marriage, but for reasons we may never understand, he never corrected the legal documents. I left the office in a daze. The winter wind slapped against my face, but I barely felt it. I walked until I found myself at the small cafe where Richard and I used to have Sunday brunch. The barista recognized me but didn't say anything, just gave a sad smile. I sat at our usual table by the window, staring at the empty chair across from me. For years, that chair held laughter, debates, little love notes scribbled on napkins. Now it just held silence. I thought about the children, their hatred, their bitterness. Maybe, in some twisted way, they were right to resent me. Maybe they saw something I didn't want to see. But love isn't a crime, and whatever name the law gave me, I knew what Richard and I shared was real. Still, a question gnawed at me. Did he know? Did he know Margaret was still alive when we married? That night, I went through his old drawers, searching for anything, letters, papers, something that could explain. In the bottom of his desk, beneath a pile of old tax returns, I found an envelope. The handwriting was familiar but not his. It was addressed to Richard Morgan and dated 2 months before our wedding. My hands trembled as I opened it. It reads, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I can't sign those papers. I know you found someone new and maybe she makes you happy, but I'm sick and I don't want to leave this world as your ex-wife. Let her have your heart if she must, but let me keep your name until I'm gone. Margaret. I dropped the letter. My tears fell onto the ink, smudging her name. She wasn't cruel. She was dying. And she wanted to leave this world as his wife. Suddenly, everything made sense. Richard hadn't lied. He just couldn't bear to tell me the truth, that his first wife was fading away slowly and he couldn't take from her the one thing she had left, his name. In his heart, he'd married me. In the law's eyes, he hadn't. I sat there for hours, clutching that letter to my chest, torn between grief and understanding. When I finally looked up, it was midnight. The house was silent, and the moonlight spilled across the living room, illuminating the wedding photo on the wall. I walked up to it, touched the frame, and whispered, I forgive you, Richard, but I need to know who I am now, because I can't be the woman who loved a man that never fully belonged to her. The days that followed felt like living inside someone else's story. I went through my routine like a ghost, answering phone calls I didn't remember, eating meals I couldn't taste, and sleeping in a bed that no longer felt like mine. The letter from Margaret never left my sight. I kept it folded in my pocket like a piece of truth too heavy to put down. It changed everything, and yet nothing at all. Because no letter, no law. No technicality could erase the nights Richard and I spent whispering about growing old together. No paper could undo the warmth of his hand in mine when he said, You make my heart young again. Still, the world didn't care about love. It cared about proof. And the proof said I was never his wife. 3 days later, Mr. Lawson called. His voice was calm but heavy, like he'd aged a decade in 1 week. I've reviewed the case and I think you should come back in. There's something I need to show you. When I arrived, the same conference room awaited me, cold, echoing judgment still lingering in the walls. Evelyn and Andrew were there again, dressed sharply, whispering smugly to one another. Chloe sat a few seats away, looking down at her phone, her eyes red from crying. Mr. Lawson cleared his throat. After verifying all the documents, we've confirmed that Mr. Morgan's previous marriage was indeed never legally dissolved. However, he paused, glancing at me, Mr. Morgan left an addendum to his will. It was filed separately, handwritten and sealed in his private safe. I only found it this morning. Evelyn rolled her eyes. More theatrics. He ignored her and opened the envelope. His voice softened as he began to read. To my dearest Elaine. If you're hearing this, it means I've failed you in one promise, the promise to protect you from pain. I tried to fix everything, but life doesn't always give us enough time to finish what we start. Margaret was part of my past, but you, Elaine, you were the light that gave my last year's meaning. I couldn't take her name from her while she was dying, but I never stopped believing that you were my true wife in every way that mattered. If the law says otherwise, then the law can have its paper, but my heart, my home, my legacy, they belong to you. I've set aside a separate trust, one no one else knows about, to ensure that you will have peace when I'm gone. And if my children cannot see the woman you are, then let this letter remind you. Love doesn't need permission to be real. Richard. My breath caught. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear fell onto my hand. Evelyn frowned. Is this even valid? A handwritten letter isn't a legal document. Mr. Lawson raised a hand. Actually, it is. Mr. Morgan's handwriting was verified and the trust he mentioned exists. It's separate from the main estate, but legally binding. Mrs., he paused and then looked straight at me, his eyes soft. Elaine, the trust is solely in your name. Evelyn's face drained of color. Andrew cursed under his breath. Chloe quietly began to sob. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt him again, not in the walls, not in the house, but in my heart. His voice, his love, his care still protecting me even when I thought I'd lost everything. Evelyn stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. She manipulated him. That's all this is. Mr. Lawson's tone sharpened. Miss Carter, I assure you, this document was written months before Mr. Morgan's death when he was fully competent. There was no manipulation. Andrew muttered something, grabbed his coat, and stormed out. Evelyn followed, her heels clicking like gunshots on marble floors. Only Chloe remained. She looked at me, her lips trembling. I didn't know, she whispered. He loved you, didn't he? I nodded, barely managing a smile. He did, and I loved him too. She wiped her eyes. I'm sorry for how we treated you. I reached out, gently taking her hand. Grief makes people cruel sometimes, but it also teaches us who we really are. When she left, I stayed behind for a while, letting silence wrap around me. For once, it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, like a soft farewell. That night, I went home and lit a candle beside Richard's photo. The flame flickered gently, like it knew it was being watched. I sat across from it, holding his letter and the one from Margaret, two sides of the same love story, one ending, one beginning. It hit me then how life is rarely black and white. Margaret loved him enough to hold onto his name, even as she died. And he loved me enough to give me his world even when he couldn't give me his signature. We were both part of his story, not in competition, but in continuation. For the first time in months, I didn't feel anger or shame. I felt gratitude. Grateful that I got to love him. Grateful that he left me with enough memories to last several lifetimes. A week later, I sold the house. Not out of bitterness, but because I needed a new beginning. I moved to a smaller place by the sea, where the mornings smell like salt and the evenings hum with quiet peace. Sometimes, I still wear my wedding ring, not as proof of anything legal, but as a reminder that love, in its purest form, doesn't need validation. One afternoon, while walking along the shore, I found a white feather drifting across the sand. I picked it up and smiled. Richard used to say feathers were heaven's way of saying, I'm still here. I looked up at the sky, whispered his name, and felt a warmth spread through me, gentle, familiar, eternal. He was gone, yes, but the love remained. And maybe that's the only kind of marriage that truly lasts forever.